What if I told you a quiet mail-order bride managed to outwit an entire outlaw gang? It sounds impossible, right? A young woman, fresh off the stagecoach, no gun, no backup, just her wits. Yet what she did shocked a whole frontier town and left a gang of cutthroats humiliated. Picture this. It's the late 1870s, Wyoming territory. The frontier was a place of grit, loneliness, and sometimes desperation. Men outnumbered women by 10 to 1 in some towns, cowboys, miners, ranchers. They worked hard, fought hard, and lived rough. But without families, without wives, many men felt their lives were empty. That's where the idea of a mail-order bride came in. Ads in newspapers back east promised lonely men a chance at companionship. And for some women, it was a ticket out of poverty, factory labor, or bad family situations. Enter Clara Dawson. She was 21, raised in a Boston boarding house, and desperate to escape a future of endless laundry and scrubbing floors. A rancher named Henry Whitaker in Wyoming had sent for her, promising a modest home and a life of stability. When Clara stepped off the stagecoach into the town of Silver Creek, she was greeted with curiosity. Folks whispered, some smiled kindly. Others judged. Mail-order brides weren't always respected, but Clara, she held her head high, like she had a secret no one else knew. Now, Silver Creek wasn't exactly safe. A gang led by Blackjack Turner had been terrorizing the area for months. They were known for stagecoach holdups, cattle rustling, and the occasional midnight raid on ranches. Nobody dared cross them. The sheriff? Let's just say his courage didn't match his badge. And when Blackjack heard that a fancy new bride was coming into town, he smirked. To him, that was an opportunity. He and his men figured a woman from back east, soft, naive, would be easy to scare, easy to use. But here's the twist. Clara wasn't as naive as she looked. Clara had grown up around gamblers, sailors, and street hustlers in Boston. She'd watched men lie, cheat, and double-cross, and she'd learned something important. The sharpest weapon wasn't a gun. It was outthinking your enemy. Still, when she met Henry Whitaker, her soon-to-be husband, she realized her situation was less than ideal. His modest home was more like a shack with holes in the roof. His debts were mounting, and worst of all, he was terrified of Blackjack Turner. Clara could have turned bitter right there, could have wept or begged someone to send her back east. But instead, she smiled. Because deep down, she saw something the others didn't. Opportunity. Days after her arrival, Blackjack's gang rode into town. They swaggered through the main street like they owned it. And when they saw Clara walking with Henry, they made it clear she was now on their radar. One outlaw tipped his hat and sneered, "Welcome to Silver Creek, miss. Hope you like excitement." Another laughed. "Don't worry, we'll be seeing you real soon." Henry turned pale. Clara, on the other hand, just gave the men a polite smile, like their threats were no more dangerous than buzzing flies. But inside, she was calculating, watching, learning their mannerisms, their weaknesses. Because Clara Dawson wasn't about to let a gang of bullies dictate her future. And here's where things get interesting. Clara wasn't just planning to survive. She was planning to trap Blackjack Turner at his own game. How could a young woman with no weapon, no allies, and no reputation possibly stand up to a gang that terrified an entire town? Well, let's just say the outlaws underestimated what a clever bride could do. Most folks in Silver Creek thought Clara would either run back east or become another victim of Blackjack Turner's gang. But Clara, she was already sketching out a plan that would put the most feared outlaws in Wyoming right where she wanted them. Silver Creek was a town that lived in the shadow of fear. Blackjack Turner and his men swaggered through whenever they pleased. They drink for free, bully merchants, and ride out before anyone dared stop them. And every time the townsfolk looked to the sheriff, he'd cough, look away, and mutter something about keeping the peace. Clara noticed something. People weren't just scared of the outlaws. They were ashamed. Grown men avoided eye contact. Mothers pulled children indoors. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about dignity. The whole town felt powerless. And that, Clara realized, was exactly what Blackjack fed on. Fear was his weapon. Take away that fear, And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as dangerous as he seemed. Clara started listening, not just to what people said, but how they said it. She'd linger near the saloon, pretending to be timid while secretly studying Blackjack's gang. One of his men, Red Malone, was a braggart, loud, drunk, and careless with secrets. Another, Slim Harper, always kept glancing at the horizon, like he was itching to run. And Blackjack himself? He played the role of fearless leader, but Clara noticed he didn't like being laughed at. For a man who lived by intimidation, humiliation was his weak spot. Clara filed it all away. Each detail was a thread in the trap she was weaving. Meanwhile, Henry Whitaker wasn't helping matters. He was kind enough, yes, but his spirit had been beaten down by years of failure. His ranch was nearly worthless, his debts heavy, and his courage, well, let's just say Clara often felt like the braver one of the two. One evening, Henry muttered, "You don't understand, Clara. Blackjack's too strong. If we just keep our heads down, maybe he'll leave us alone." Clara smiled faintly and said, "Henry, outlaws don't leave you alone. They take more and more until there's nothing left." She didn't argue further. She didn't need to. She already knew she couldn't count on Henry. This was her fight. The turning point came at Sunday service. The preacher spoke about courage, about David facing Goliath. Most folks fidgeted, looking down at their boots. But Clara sat tall, listening. And then, like a spark, it hit her. If Blackjack ruled with fear, then what if she flipped the script? What if she made him look like a fool in front of the very people he controlled? It was risky, maybe suicidal. But if she could outwit them publicly, the gang's hold over Silver Creek might shatter. Still, how could she, a stranger, a woman with no power, pull that off? That night, Clara did something bold. She walked into the saloon, heads turned, the piano player stopped mid-song. Men whispered, surprised to see the new bride in such a place. She walked straight to the bar, ordered a glass of sarsaparilla, and pretended to be shy. Then, when Blackjack's men noticed her, she let them come to her. Red Malone swaggered over, slurring, "Well, look who's here, the little bride. What brings you to a place like this?" Clara tilted her head, eyes wide with mock innocence. "I heard this is where the brave men of Silver Creek spend their nights. Thought I'd see for myself." The room chuckled. Red puffed up, proud. Blackjack smirked from the corner, watching. Clara knew she had their attention. That was step one. And then, Clara made her move. With one carefully chosen remark, she set in motion a chain of events that would drag the entire outlaw gang into her trap. But what could she possibly say that would push Blackjack Turner, the most feared outlaw in Wyoming, onto her chessboard? What do you say to a gang of outlaws that makes them walk straight into your trap? Clara Dawson knew, and when she opened her mouth in that saloon, the whole room leaned in. Red Malone smirked, waiting for Clara to flirt, to stumble, to act like an innocent little bird. Instead, she leaned forward and said, "Funny thing, back in Boston, folks always bragged about outlaws being so clever. But from what I've heard, Blackjack Turner's boys can't even win a fair card game." The room went silent. You could have heard a poker chip drop. Red blinked. "What'd you just say?" Clara sipped her sarsaparilla unbothered. "Oh, don't mind me. Maybe I heard wrong. Surely real men wouldn't need to cheat at cards." That was it. She'd struck the nerve. Because if there's one thing outlaws hated more than the law, it was being laughed at. Blackjack stood from the corner, slow and dangerous. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. His silence had weight. "Miss Dawson," he said, voice low, "you got a sharp tongue for a new bride. Maybe you'd like to put your money where your mouth is." Clara raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" The outlaw leader grinned. "A game. Cards. If my boys win, you admit they're the smartest in Silver Creek. If you win," he paused, smirk curling. "Well, what is it you want?" Clara didn't hesitate. "If I win, you and your men leave Henry Whitaker's ranch alone, permanently." Gasps spread through the room. The audacity! Henry nearly fainted where he sat in the corner. But Blackjack, oh, he loved it. To him it was just sport. He thought she was walking right into his den. The game was set for the following Friday night. Word spread like wildfire. Folks from miles around came to Silver Creek just to watch. The saloon was packed shoulder to shoulder as lanterns flickered and the smell of whiskey and sweat filled the air. Blackjack's men lounged like wolves circling their prey. Clara sat at the table, hands steady, eyes sharp. She wasn't just playing cards. She was playing them. Henry whispered, "Clara, please, don't do this." She smiled faintly. "Trust me." And then, the game began. Clara didn't rush. She let Red win a few early hands. She let Slim grin with confidence. She made them think she was nervous, out of her depth. But underneath the performance, she was memorizing every tell, every twitch of a lip, every glance at hidden cards. Red scratched his ear when he bluffed. Slim drummed his fingers when he had a good hand. And Blackjack? He didn't like patience. He liked domination. He pushed hard, fast, expecting her to fold. The crowd leaned in closer with each hand. The tension was unbearable. At last the moment came. Blackjack pushed all his chips in, certain of victory. The saloon held its breath. Clara looked at her cards, then at him. Slowly, she pushed her small pile of coins forward. "I'll call." Blackjack grinned, slamming his cards down. A winning hand. His men erupted in cheers. But Clara just smiled. She laid her cards gently on the table. A higher hand, the only one that could beat his. The saloon exploded. Gasps, cheers, laughter. It was chaos. Blackjack's face darkened, his pride torn to shreds. And in that moment, Clara didn't just win a game. She won the crowd. But here's the kicker. Clara's victory wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because when you humiliate an outlaw in front of his gang, you don't just bruise his ego. You paint a target on your back. And Blackjack Turner wasn't the kind of man to lick his wounds quietly. Winning a card game against outlaws? That's bold. But humiliating Blackjack Turner in front of his gang? That was like pouring kerosene on a campfire. Clara hadn't just bruised his pride, she'd lit a fuse. For a few days, Silver Creek buzzed like a hive. Folks whispered about Clara's victory as if it were a legend already. The girl from Boston had walked into a saloon, stared down a gang, and won. Children played games pretending to be Miss Dawson, outsmarting outlaws. Shopkeepers chuckled. Even the preacher smiled a little brighter that Sunday. But Clara knew better. She felt it in her bones. Blackjack wasn't done. It came at dusk. Clara and Henry returned to their ranch to find the barn door hanging open. Inside, their milk cow lay dead, shot through the head. A crude message was carved into the wood. "Next time it's you." Henry dropped to his knees, shaking. "Clara, what have you done?" Clara's hands trembled, but she steadied them. She whispered, "They're trying to scare us, which means they're scared." Over the next week, the gang grew bolder. They rode through town at night, firing pistols into the air. They shouted Clara's name, mocking her. And the townsfolk, those same people who had cheered her, suddenly looked away again. It was the old fear creeping back. Clara had sparked something, yes. But if she failed now, it would crush the town's spirit worse than before. Henry begged her to leave. "We can pack your things, send you back east. Nobody will blame you." Clara looked at him softly. "Henry, I didn't come all this way to run. I came here to build a life, and I'll be damned if I let a pack of bullies steal it." Then came the night of the ambush. Clara was walking back from the mercantile, basket of flour under her arm, when she felt the prickle of eyes on her back. From the shadows, Slim Harper and Red Malone stepped out, guns glinting. "Well, well," Slim sneered, "if it ain't the clever little bride. Boss says you've made a fool of him. Can't let that stand." Clara froze, but not with fear. She glanced around. A dozen townsfolk were peeking from windows. The gang wanted witnesses. They wanted to scare the whole town at her expense. And Clara realized this was her chance. She set her basket down slowly, then laughed. A calm, cutting laugh that made the outlaws blink. "Funny," she said. "Blackjack sends you two? The coward must really be desperate." Red's face reddened. "Watch your mouth, woman." But Clara stepped closer. voice louder so the townsfolk could hear. Everyone knows Blackjack can't face me himself. He hides behind lackeys. A real leader wouldn't send boys to do his dirty work. The crowd behind curtains stirred. Slim shifted uncomfortably. The seed of doubt was planted. Before Red could strike, the sheriff, finally shamed into action, stepped out with his rifle. "That's enough," he barked. The outlaws hesitated. They hadn't expected interference. With muttered curses, they retreated into the night, but not before Red hissed, "You're dead, Dawson. You just don't know when." The sheriff looked at Clara. "Ma'am, I can't promise to keep them off forever, but you've got more guts than half this town combined." Clara just nodded. She knew it wasn't over, not by a long shot. That night, Clara sat by the window, lantern flickering on her face. She could almost feel Blackjack Turner out there in the darkness, waiting, plotting. He'd lost his pride. His men were questioning him. And now he was desperate, which made him even more dangerous. The final showdown was coming, and Clara knew she'd have only one chance to end this game for good. Every outlaw story ends one of two ways, with blood or with humiliation. Clara Dawson was betting everything on the second option, and if she failed, well, that there wouldn't be a second chance. It happened at sunrise. Hoofbeats thundered in the distance. Blackjack Turner and his gang, 6 men strong, rode straight toward Henry Whitaker's ranch. Dust clouds rose like smoke signals, announcing the storm that was coming. Henry panicked, stumbling to grab his shotgun. "Clara, we've got to run!" But Clara's voice was calm. "No, Henry. If we run now, they'll never stop hunting us. It ends today." She'd prepared for this moment. All week she'd been quietly setting the stage, borrowing rope, scattering whispers, and even recruiting a few brave townsfolk. What looked like desperation was actually strategy. The gang pulled up to the ranch, pistols drawn, Blackjack dismounted, his black coat flaring behind him. His eyes burned with rage. "Dawson," he growled, "you made me look like a fool, and now I'll make sure this whole town remembers who really runs Silver Creek." Clara stepped forward, chin high, her dress whipping in the wind. No weapon, no fear, just her voice. "You think they fear you, Blackjack, but after tonight, they'll laugh at you." That stung. His jaw tightened. For a man like Blackjack, laughter was worse than a bullet. Just as Blackjack raised his pistol snap, the hidden ropes Clara had strung across the yard tightened, pulled by townsfolk hiding nearby. Horses panicked, rearing and throwing 2 of the gang to the dirt. Another outlaw stumbled into a trough, sputtering and cursing. Chaos erupted, and over it all, Clara's voice rang clear. "Look at them! The mighty Blackjack Turner and his boys, tripped by a woman's laundry line." The crowd of onlookers, yes, she'd made sure word got out, burst into laughter. Actual roaring laughter. Men, women, even children. Blackjack's face turned red as fire. He fired a shot wildly, but the sheriff, at last finding his courage, aimed steady and disarmed him. Pinned, outnumbered, and stripped of his power, Blackjack was dragged to the center of town. Folks who once bowed their heads now stood tall, spitting in the dust at his boots. Clara addressed the crowd. "You see, fear only works if you let it. They can't rule us if we don't hand them the crown." For the first time, the people of Silver Creek cheered, not out of relief, but out of pride. The outlaw reign was broken, not by gunfire, but by one woman's refusal to be cowed. In the weeks that followed, the Whitaker Ranch slowly became more than a shack. Neighbors helped repair fences, patch the roof, and plant crops. Henry, once timid, began to walk straighter, inspired by Clara's courage. As for Clara, she wasn't just the mail-order bride anymore. She was the woman who outwitted an outlaw gang, and the town of Silver Creek never forgot it. Sometimes legends are made with gunsmoke and bullets, but sometimes they're made with wit, nerve, and just the right touch of laughter. And that's the story of how a young woman from Boston turned the Wild West upside down with nothing but her smarts. Makes you wonder, how many other forgotten heroes and heroines reshaped the frontier in ways the history books barely mention? If you want to hear more stories like this, true tales, tall tales, and the wild in-betweens of the Old West, make sure you stick around. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment with the legend you'd like me to cover next, and keep riding with us through the dusty trails of history.